Anyway, we've recorded all the lessons so far for you to watch. Okay? Especially for you. Okay. Yeah. Okay, so inside this is what we call a body warmer. You can see right now that the pack, right, is airtight. It's sealed so well. Okay, how do we use this? To read the instructions. Open the outer bag just before use. Take out the inner bag. You can peel off the release paper. Then after you place the hot pack on your clothes, avoid direct contact with skin. Oh, I didn't read the instructions the last time around I used it. Yes, I put it directly on my skin. I got a first degree burn. Actually, so it was winter time. Okay, so it's a hand warmer. Later on when you tear open, right, it will start the reaction. I didn't read instructions, so I put it directly on my skin, on my neck. I went out for one whole day. When I came back, right, and I peeled off that thing, a layer of skin went came off also. Wow, it was so painful, man. Yeah, thinking about it, right? So basically what happened was that it burned the first layer of my skin. I peeled off. Wow, I didn't think it would get that hot. Okay, but anyway, so that's how it works. The moment we open this up, we are going to kickstart a reaction. Okay? Okay, you all can open it up now if you want to. I don't know, I got a burn, one layer of skin. From my experience, when I shake it, right, it helps a little bit. I guess the air in. Okay, but before you start, listen. You feel it right now. What does it feel like? Okay. Later on, when you feel it, right, hopefully you'll feel the temperature change. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's going to feel it, Okay, right now you feel the temperature of it. Okay, how does it feel? Okay, later on as the reaction continues on, you start to feel the temperature rise. The previous class that I gave this to, it didn't get that hot. It didn't get hot to the point to burn anyone. Okay, let me know how it goes in a while. Yeah? But today we're going to learn a little bit about how this works. See? Okay, can I tell everyone to stand by your notes for today? Okay, in your notes, I'd like you to go to this part of the chapter. Okay, new notes, cellular respiration. We go to page 2. This is where we are starting off today. Fantastic. Hey, your chemistry is your chem teacher. Miss who? Best chem teacher. Okay, Miss O. So, Miss O has taught you redox reaction, yeah? Okay, so, fantastic. Wow, bless. Yeah, I didn't teach it. Every time I teach redox reaction, I'm making a fool of myself. But the students don't know, so I just pretend I know. Okay, so I'm just going to share a little bit about how this works. The reason why this is airtight at the moment, right, is because the moment you open this up, it kickstarts a reaction that you've learned about in chemistry. It's called a redox reaction. Just quickly recap each other. What's the redox reaction mean?
Wait, must we form redox reaction?
What mean form? No. That's not what I want in biology. Okay, ready? Is it getting warmer? Yeah, it's getting warmer. Okay, how warm is it now? Enough to burn you. Okay, Jeremy, can you look up? Hey, you see what I'm doing? I tell you, I burn one layer of skin now, you see pain in your skin. Okay. The chemical reaction taking place in that pack right there is none other than a reaction you already learned about. Not the reaction specifically, but you've learned about this class of reactions, and we call this redox reaction. If we break down the word redox reaction, it stands for reduction and oxidation, right? Both together. So, you saw in the ingredient pack, one of the ingredients is iron. Yeah? Iron. When you open up the pack, what you're doing is to expose this iron to oxygen. And what happens next is the interesting bit. Okay? Iron has electrons, right? Just with the same as any element of gold. Iron has electrons. But the thing, what happens next is this. The electron is transferred to oxygen. Okay? The electron is transferred to oxygen. As a result, the byproduct eventually, what you get is water. And what you get from the iron that has now been oxidized because you remove the electrons. This is oxidized iron. Or actually something more familiar to you is rust. Actually what's happening right there in that pack is rusting. Rusting is taking place. Except that the rusting you see takes place on a huge chunk of metal. Here right there inside that pack, they finally melt down the iron into fine powder, increase the surface area for this redox reaction to take place. The air also. Yeah? Okay, I simplify a lot of things, but you gain electrons, you should also gain hydrogen to form the water. Okay? Yeah, my chemistry is like half bigger. Okay. So, but the form of redox reaction I want you to pay attention to for this chapter, right, is the idea that there's transference of electrons. I believe this O has taught you different kinds of redox, ways you can talk about redox, right? In terms of gaining or losing hydrogen, gaining or losing oxygen. But for our context, we want to focus on electrons. Okay, so I want to practice with you. So, iron has been oxidized or reduced. Oh, shucks, it's right there. Okay, it has been oxidized, right? Whereas oxygen has been reduced. Collectively, this is a redox reaction. Yeah? Yeah? Oxygen gains electron, considered reduced. Iron loses an electron, is considered oxidized. Yeah? Oh yeah, another way to look at it is by oxidation stage, right? Negative. Okay. Well, thanks because I don't know what you're talking about. Okay. Yeah. Okay, what I provided to you on the whiteboard is really a simplified understanding of a redox reaction. Okay? So in other words, I would like to introduce some vocabulary before we start today's topic. Number one, in a redox reaction, there's always an electron donor. Yeah? Iron in this case is the electron donor. We will also have an electron acceptor. Yeah? Okay? Electron donor, electron acceptor. So two new vocab for today. Our focus for today, we are diving into a new chapter called Cellular Respiration. the reason why I brought this pack today for you to experience is because the redox reaction that takes place here is kind of like the reaction that takes place for our mitochondria. You see how so? So how so? Rather than iron, our body makes use of another substrate. And that substrate is glucose. Okay? Our body makes use of glucose. Not iron, we don't really eat iron, right? Okay, so, I mean we do, but it's not used for that purpose. It goes into our blood. Okay. Okay? Glucose. At the end of the day, there's a final oxidized state, right? What we get in the process of cellular respiration, we get CO2. Cellular respiration, this process is essentially a redox reaction. Okay, at the simplest of it all, it's a redox reaction. C6H12O6. Hey, okay, it's here, your note's not out, playing with pen. Okay. So, except our mitochondria is able to do something a little bit more special. Here, the moment you expose iron to the air, oxygen, this starts giving off heat energy. Heat energy, is it correct or wrong? Thermal energy. Wow, that was close. Okay, thermal energy, right? Our mitochondria doesn't let energy dissipate. Instead, it harnesses the energy to make something more useful. So earlier on, what you experience is this. When there is a transfer of electrons, there's also a release of energy. The energy you experience in the pack was thermal energy being released. But our body is able to make use of the energy. We are able to harness the energy. And instead, we harness the energy to synthesize ATP. Heard of ATP before? Yeah? I think you all just finally memorize what the function of mitochondria is, right? To synthesize ATP, right? Often ATP is called the currency or energy in a cell. We call it a currency for energy because a lot of chemical reaction requires ATP to jumpstart. That's why we call it a currency for energy. Cellular respiration at its core is a redox reaction that harnesses this energy to synthesize ATP for many chemical reactions in our body. This is an overview of where we are going to go for the next 2 lessons. Okay, once we've got the overview in our mind, it's much easier for us to appreciate the nitty-gritty stuff that happens in between. Is it getting hotter? Yeah. Yeah, very slow. There's one last thing I'd like to introduce to you today. One last vocab. Hey, here's the thing. When, imagine if our body actually did this, if our body actually transferred all the electrons from glucose to oxygen directly, the release of energy will be too fast and too large at one go. Yeah? You will heat up. Our body isn't able to tap on the energy that well. Okay? We don't want the electrons to be transferred directly to oxygen at such a fast rate. We will end up losing a lot of energy, and actually a lot of energy will be released at one go. Instead, we break down the steps along the way. So what you experience in the next few chapters is this. Along the way, there are chemicals that will come in that act as what we call electron carriers. The role of electron carriers is very simply to hold on to the electrons temporarily and release them bit by bit to oxygen. So that the release of energy along the way is not so sudden. We release it bit by bit, and we produce ATP slowly. Okay, so I want you to take note of the word electron carriers. You will encounter this particular chemical along the way, and the chemical is called NADH. NAD plus. NAD plus at its core is an example of an electron carrier. Its role is really just to hold on to electrons temporarily as it's extracting it out from glucose. Yeah? Okay, so I've given enough vocab for today. We're going to begin very soon. Okay, so this is something you'll see very often, NAD plus later on. What NAD plus role is this? When it gains an electron, as an electron carrier, it will convert itself into this form. This form is called NADH. Okay? So you often see two forms of this, NAD plus and NADH. NADH is the form that has gained electrons. And we refer to this as an electron carrier. Okay, so this is the broadest overview of this chapter. We're going to start to dive deeper into the various steps. To give you some time to touch up the notes. Once done, I'd like you to just quickly pass with your neighbor the structure of the mitochondria. Whether you can remember the structure. Yes? ATP is a chemical, but it was made using the energy of AI. If you will see this tomorrow's lesson, you will see exactly how it is. Okay, what does the mitochondria look like? Okay, look at jelly bean now. Okay, very quickly, can you just do a quick sketch of what a mitochondria looks like in your mind? Okay, I'm going to erase the whiteboard now. And up. Okay. Oh, here are two membranes, very good. Okay, so before I erase this, do one last summary. Cellular respiration at its core is a redox reaction. All we are really doing is to extract out all the electrons from glucose and pass it on to oxygen. Except we don't do that at one go. We have electron carriers like NAD+, that will help to carry these electrons to the final destination. Okay? Alright, so now I'm going to erase this and we're going to look at the structure of the mitochondria. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? You always say the same thing. Mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. Yeah, so now you're upper J maybe, I don't want to hear that anymore, okay? So if I were to ask you for the function of mitochondria, you would say that its function is to synthesize ATP. Okay? No more powerhouse of the cell. Now it's like primary school definition. Okay? Hey, you'd be surprised what primary school students learn now. They learn structure of the cell, right? They learn a lot of stuff now. You learn primary school. Hey, you all learn algebra in primary school? Do you know I did not learn algebra in primary school? I only learned it in like secondary school, like Sec 2. Yeah, so a lot of things being brought down. Hey, do you know what a basket is? You know what? I learned in primary school. You learn it? Oh, you know what? it's like the old school calculator, you know what is the best class. Okay. Yes, it is. I'm very lazy, I don't want to keep drawing the same thing. When I first started teaching, right, every time I reach this chapter, right, students will wait for a good few minutes for me to draw the phospholipid. Okay, so here phospholipid bilayer. How many bilayers do you see on the whiteboard? 2. How many layers of phospholipids do you see? 4. Okay, so just a recap. Alright, now we're going to go into the structure of a mitochondria because that's really where this redox reaction will take place. What does a mitochondria look like? If you just look at it, it looks kind of like a jelly bean. Okay? However, if I were to slice this mitochondria up, let's do a cross section of it. This is what you'll see. You'll see that the mitochondria is made up of 2 bilayers. There's an outer layer and there's an inner layer. And this inner layer is highly folded. Okay, this inner layer is highly folded. There's a name for this outer and inner layer. Want me to guess? Very good. Okay, so it's called the outer and inner membrane. Yeah, so nothing very special about it. Okay, so I'm just going to draw your attention up. So the outer layer is the outer membrane of the mitochondria. And then there's an inner layer. Inner membrane. Okay, this is what I'm trying to represent over here, the outer and inner membrane. Subsequent lessons, I won't draw the mitochondria anymore. I'm just going to pick up these 2 things on the whiteboard and I expect you to know it's outer and inner. Okay? If this is the outer membrane and the mitochondria is floating in the cell, what is this space outside the cell? What's outside the cell? Cytoplasm. So right here, outside the outer membrane, expect to find cytoplasm. Okay? 2 more locations I'd like to introduce today. One is this layer in between, okay, this interlayer. Okay, then over here, there's an inner space also. Okay, want to make a guess what this layer is called? This yeah? Hydrophobic what? Hydrophobic core, okay. Hydrophobic core is over here. Okay, hydrophobic core is where all the hydrophobic tails are. So here's a hydrophobic core, here's another hydrophobic core. Correct, there are 2 bilayers. Yeah? Just like. Okay, also, the space in between these 2 membranes is called the. Okay, nothing special. It's just called the intermembrane. Yeah? Space. Hey, can you all appreciate this? Yeah? Very often you get like random names, right? But now you get a very straightforward one. Outer membrane, intermembrane space. Yeah? Cannot go wrong, huh? Okay, this last space over here, I don't quite know the origin of the name, but it's related to a movie. Okay, it's called The Matrix. Okay? This space inside over here is called the matrix. So I'm going to write the matrix in here. So matrix. Okay, intermembrane space is IMS, intermembrane space. Okay? So just draw your attention to the 3 locations and the 2 membranes involved. Okay, you need to pay attention to these as we go into this chapter. Okay, now, can I get you to open your SLS? We have a new one today. You will go to, this is 403, right? Okay, you go to the new one on cellular respiration. I'd like you to access folder A. Under folder A, we're just going to start off our chapter. by answering this question. Okay, can I get everyone to go into SLX? Go to folder A. Okay, for this particular chapter, I'd like you to put on the lens that we put on in our previous chapter, interactions. Okay, interactions. And we're going to ask ourselves the same questions we asked ourselves in the previous chapter. When we look at interactions, we want to look at a few things. Number one, where? Where is this interaction taking place? Number two, who is involved? Yeah? Number three, why? Why are we carrying out this interaction? Or in other words, what is being produced? Or what is the change? Find what? Okay? As we go through this chapter, these are the questions we want to ask ourselves at every point of the reaction. Where is it taking place? Who is involved? What is produced? What's the change? And why are we carrying out this process? Okay? So, to begin today's lesson, I'd just like to get everyone on the same page. Let's start with this first question. In order to carry out cellular respiration as we know it, what do you think is needed? Okay? What do you think is needed for cellular respiration to take place? Based on what you already know. And then our goal is to focus on what you've listed and we see where they pop up along the way. Okay? What do you think is needed? Okay, I'm going to show all our responses as a class. Oh. Okay, once you keyed in, you can actually view your friends' responses. Okay. Energy, oxygen. Okay, what is needed in cellular respiration? Okay, if you're done keying in, I get you to look up so I know that you're done. Alright, let me look at some of our responses. Okay, not everyone's done, I only have like 5 people. Some of the things that you think is required for cellular respiration. First, we look at critic. It says, is energy needed? Is oxygen needed? Oxygen is needed. Is energy needed? Okay, we'll see in a while. We do need a little bit just to jumpstart the whole reaction. Okay, we need a little bit. Okay, but primarily, we do need oxygen. I think you learned this in primary school, right? Did you learn this in primary school, chemical reaction of cellular respiration? So, do you all learn photosynthesis in primary school? Yeah, right? No, photosynthesis is water plus carbon dioxide, then you get sugar, right? So, do you learn the other one, respiration? Never. Okay, Ryan brought up something interesting. Expansion and contraction of the lungs. Okay. Is on this note that I would like to make a differentiation. Cellular respiration versus respiration. Okay, so actually there are two different levels. When we look at respiration, it's what you learned last year. Okay, was it what you learned last year? Oh, you haven't learned yet. Okay, I'll teach you then. Okay? Respiration has to do with breathing. How do you breathe in and out? The scale we are looking at today, when we say cellular respiration, we are focusing inside the mitochondria. Microscopic chemical reactions. Okay? Oxygen, glucose, and electron carriers. Yes, we do need these three things. Right, so I'd like you to pay attention to where these three things pop up along the way. Others, okay, I see glucose, oxygen. Primarily, we do need a lot of glucose and oxygen. I see it's brought up something interesting. Enzymes and proteins. As this is right. Every chemical reaction in our body requires enzymes. Cellular respiration, no different. Along the way, see if you can spot any enzymes that are involved. Are there proteins involved? Yeah, there will be proteins involved. Along the way, see if you can spot any proteins involved. Enzymes are proteins, but there are other proteins. Okay, so as I scroll down, largely I see glucose, oxygen. Okay, then the question is, do we need water? We actually produce water as a byproduct of cellular respiration. Okay, so I want you to pay attention to where water is produced. Right? So if we want to nail down the things that are involved, number one, you will need glucose. Number two, you need oxygen. Number three, you need electron carriers. You also need enzymes. And products wise, you should get CO2, you should get ATP, you should also get water. These are the things you want to look out for before and after the reaction. Okay? When I draw this arrow, it doesn't mean that they necessarily transform from one to another. It's just before and after. Okay, so at the start, these are the things you expect to have. At the end of cellular respiration, these are the things you want to produce. Okay? So with this overview in mind, we're going to start searching for where these things pop up along the way. We are going to now break down cellular respiration to a much deeper understanding for you at this level in JH3. If you go to page 4 of your notes, this is the broadest overview of the various steps of cellular respiration. Okay? Page 4 provides you a very good overview. There are 4 broad steps. Yes. Okay. Okay. There are 4 broad steps in cellular respiration. Today, we'll see how much you can go through. I suspect we will stop at this part over here. Okay? Just like run through. First step you will encounter is glycolysis. I'm just saying this so that you know how to pronounce it. Glycolysis. Sometimes I will say glycolysis just so that you know that glyco means sugar, lysis means to break. Okay, glycolysis. The second step is called pyruvate oxidation. Therefore, you can expect that over here, electrons are being taken out of this thing called pyruvate. Okay, so if you see oxidation, it means we're taking out electrons. Last step, before this final step, citric acid cycle. Sometimes citric acid cycle is named as Krebs cycle. Okay, there are 2 different names. You will see this in your textbook, Krebs cycle. Okay, so our focus for the first part of our lesson is to focus on 1, 2, 3 steps of cellular respiration. And we want to pay attention to where, who, why, what. Okay, once you're done with section A, you now skip ahead to section C. Okay, go to section C. Section C includes the first 3 steps of cellular respiration. For the first part of today's lesson, we're going to search for these parties involved in each step. So stand by your SLS as well as your textbook next to you. This is what's going to happen. I'd like you to complete folders 1 and folder 2. Right, tab 1 and tab 2. Both tabs ask you the same question. What is the change? Okay, what is the change through this step? Number 2, what is needed in this step? These are questions we always ask ourselves when we look at interactions. Now, in your pairs, everyone has a pair. Okay, you can find a partner. Okay? Find someone to work with. You don't have to work alone. I'm going to give you around 12 minutes to 15 minutes to complete this task. This task involves you reading the sections on glycolysis, the link reaction, or the second step, oxidative pyruvate oxidation, the last step, Krebs cycle. Okay? In 12 minutes, sorry, in 15 minutes, I'd like you to find out as much information as you can, and then we'll do a quick sharing on what you've discovered on the where, who, why, and what of each step. Okay? Have you found someone to work with? Ready? Yeah? Okay, so our 15 minutes starts now. As you read through your notes, you may want to highlight using different colors the things that are involved, the things that are produced, so that you can come back to it next time as you're revising. you have any questions, you don't understand any phrasing, please raise your hand. I'm walking around now. Yeah. Why? So, what we're showing you here is basically just to start the reaction, it's not like a stop. Later on in the reaction, one of the steps ends up producing formula. Oh, that's the point. Okay, so where does energy come from? And at least at this point, the energy actually comes from much more. So at this point, yeah, just like I said that no different energy is produced like T-Rex. Half of it happens at a very late stage. This particular stage, right, is formation. So the idea of interactions is to know where, who is involved, what's produced. Yeah, correct. Now how, this not of consent at this level. When you go to SH, then you look at how. Yeah, you like to compare up to page 2. Okay, now around 1 more minute, I'll be going through page 1. Then I'll give you more time to complete page 2. Just to give you a flavor and idea of how you want to look at these processes, yeah? is, I'd like you to touch up page 1. We're going to have a look at page 1. Let's look at some of our responses from the charts. Glycolysis, the first reaction that takes place. Let's look at, okay, although this was not asked, I want to just check with all of you. Glycolysis, where does this interaction take place? You come across it in your reading? Okay, so take note, it takes place in the cytoplasm. So glycolysis takes place in the cytoplasm. Okay? So now let's go through who is involved, what is the change, or what the products produce. Okay, let's have a look at some answers. Amanda says each molecule of glucose is converted to 2 molecules of pyruvate. She also says ATP is produced. Is that something you took note of? Yeah? Okay, so kind of the who, right? Who? Glucose is involved. What is the change? The change involves it changing into what we call pyruvate. Specifically, 2 pyruvate for every glucose. If you're wondering why 2, it's because glucose is made up of 6 carbons. Pyruvate is made up of 3 carbons each. So actually what's happening is that we're chopping glucose into half. That's essentially what's happening. Okay? That's why I call it glycolysis. Yeah? Glycolysis. She says ATP is also produced. Is that one thing you took note of? How many ATP is produced? Okay, so is it 2 or is it 4? Okay, look carefully. Okay, so there's a slight difference, right? 4 ATP is produced, or a net of 2 ATP is produced. Understand the difference? Okay, if I were to show you the diagram in your notes, this is what it looks like. At the very beginning of the reaction, we use 2 ATP, kind of like a spark that will start off a fire. Later on in the reaction, 4 ATP will be produced. Okay? And so we say a net of 2 ATP is produced because we use 4, but we use 2, but we produce 4. 4 minus 2 is 2. Yeah, so a net of 2. Okay? Okay, so ATP is also one of the products. ATP. Anything else is produced. Okay. So over here, NADH is also one of the products. Okay, this may not be very clear to you in your textbook, therefore I want to draw your attention to it. Here, notice is NAD plus is being gained electrons, so it's being reduced, right? NAD plus gains electrons. Remember, NAD plus is an electron carrier. So the question is, where did these electrons come from? Yeah, it came from glucose. Okay, so take note. If I want to make it very specific now, look at this arrow over here. I pick up some electrons, and this goes to forming NADH. Okay? So you may want to make a note somewhere. This electron here actually comes from the glucose. We are oxidizing glucose. Remember, cellular respiration at the end of the day is an oxidation reaction also. We are oxidizing glucose. We are taking out the electrons from glucose. But where is it going? We are putting it in an electron carrier for now. Okay, this is the electron carrier I was saying earlier. It's an electron carrier. Okay, any questions so far? Any questions so far? Okay, but this is the lens that we want to take for interactions. We need to know the where, You want to know the who is involved. You want to know what's the change and what are the products being produced. Okay? If you apply these lens over and over again for every reaction, actually that's all we want to focus on. Some of you may be a little bit troubled by the how. We don't really talk about the how this reaction takes place. That is something we will do with SH. So if you were to go to SH, then we'll go into the how. Right now, we don't focus on it. We just look at the start and the end for every reaction. If you want to look at the how, right, this is what the how looks like. You see the many steps? Okay, that's the how. Alright? In reality, there are many steps to this first glycolysis step. Okay? Many steps in this one arrow, but we simplify it for our GH3 level. Okay? GH4 level. Okay? Don't say that. No, it's because I'm also teaching the same thing to GH3s. Remember I told you? No. The GH3s this year, they are learning this also. Yeah, so they are bringing this down to GH3s. You're not dumb. Okay, let's look at other responses. This is a very detailed one. Each molecule of glucose is converted to 2 molecules of pyruvate. Yeah. In the process, ATP is produced without oxygen being involved. Yeah. Each molecule of glucose produces 2 pyruvate, 4 ATP, net production of 2 ATP. A summary of what we've been discussing. Okay, if we scroll down, this is largely what we see also. Charlotte made mention that it takes place in the cytosol. So she's a bit more specific than where. Emily mentioned that glucose is converted to 2 molecules of pyruvate. Okay? So largely this is what we've observed, the interaction. What is needed? Okay? Now let's look at what's needed. Charlotte mentioned that we need glucose. Yes? She also mentioned that we need NAD+. Yes, we need the electron carriers to store these electrons. We also require enzymes. Yes, but you do not need to know the enzymes in this reaction. There are too many. Okay, last but not least, we need ATP. Yes, we use a little bit of ATP just to jumpstart the reaction. Okay, so this is the lens I'd like you to apply. I do not need you to know every step of the way. I just need you to know what is produced. Okay? And what is needed. That's really all we need at this level. So, with that in mind, let's go to page 2. If you have not completed page 2, please spend the remaining time to complete page 2. I'll give you around a good 7 minutes more. And in this 7 minutes, if you need any questions, you want to ask any questions, I'll be walking around to answer your questions. Let's say a phrasing you don't quite understand, I'll help you with that. Right, 7 more minutes to complete page 2. Then we will extract out the information we need. Okay, 3 more minutes for the next 2 phases. Last 2 minutes. I say 3/4 of the class. Those who are not done, I need to focus up. Okay, a lot of you are very sharp. You are able to summarize exactly what it eventually becomes. We need a lot of these electron carriers just to keep picking up electrons. Yeah, pass it to who? It's the very last step. You see where all passes to. Finish now, Amanda. Okay, last 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'd like everyone to look up. Let's look at what the why, the where, the who's involved. In link reaction and Krebs cycle, very broadly, okay, there are 2 steps involved. Yeah? There are different names to these processes. Link reaction is an easier way to describe the pyruvate oxidation. Krebs cycle is also an easier way to describe the citric acid cycle. Alright, you can use these 2 terms instead of the longer version. So let's look at the why, at the where first. Where does link reaction take place based on your readings? Where does it take place? Okay, Charlotte has put that it takes place in the matrix. See the word matrix? Okay. Anyone else has a suggestion of where it takes place? Does it take place in the matrix? Yeah? Okay, it takes place in the matrix. So take note. Link reaction takes place inside the matrix. Let's look at who is involved. So who is involved at the very start? I believe as we look through, everyone mentioned, you have to mention pyruvate. That was the question. Okay, pyruvate. Pyruvate is involved. So I'm going to draw a pyruvate. What does it turn into? Okay, that's the question. What is the change? I'm going to draw some links right here, right now. Link reaction requires pyruvate. But my question will be, where did this pyruvate come from? Great, it comes from glycolysis. So you see how everything links to each other? One step leads to the next. So this pyruvate at the top is the same pyruvate that will be brought in for link reaction. Okay? Think of it as a continuous process, but we look at it in 3 distinct steps. What does pyruvate turn into? A lot of us mentioned acetal CoA. Okay, that's correct. Acetal CoA. Okay, acetal CoA. What else is produced? Okay, let's have a look. Okay, for the link reaction, pyruvate is oxidized, losing an electron to NAD plus we form NADH. Actually, same thing again. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. Again, we're going to extract out electrons. Okay, notice at every step we do the same thing. We extract out electrons, and electrons will be added to the electron carrier to become NADH. Every step we just do the same thing. The electron carrier's role is just to extract out more electrons, more electrons. For what purpose? The very last step, you'll all come together. You see where it goes up. Other than that, we also extract out other things. If we go to the link reaction, notice that a CO2 is also extracted out. So you know, right? In cellular respiration, CO2 is one of the byproducts. This is where CO2 comes from. It is the CO2 that you breathe out. It is exactly where it comes from, the link reaction. So next time someone asks you, hey, where does the CO2 come from that you breathe out? And you won't just say, oh, it comes from my lungs. It came from the link reaction in the matrix of the mitochondria. Wow. Well, thanks, Vega. You're the first person ever in my life that laughed at that part. Thank you. I feel flattered. Okay, so a few things. CO2 is produced, acetal CoA, as well as NADH. Who is involved? Pyruvate as well as NAD+. Right, last one. Let's go to the Krebs cycle. I have some good news for you. I do not need you to know this cycle. Okay? You see there are many steps to this cycle. Okay, good news for you is I do not need you to know all these intermediate steps. Okay, if you didn't catch that, then bad for you, but you will end up remembering this. Hayden, what did I say? Okay, not bad. Okay. Oh, Masha. Okay, I say again, you do not need to know the intermediate steps. What do you need to know? Same thing. You need to know the where, the who, the what's the change. So if I were to summarize this, what happens to acetal CoA? Excellent, okay? It becomes this, right? It becomes this at the end of the day, right? Oxaloacetate. Okay, so I'm going to link this together. Let's bring this over here. Okay, this is the last part, Krebs cycle. Okay, the acetal CoA. Okay, eventually you oxaloacetate. All the intermediate steps only you to know. Okay. What other products are there? What other intermediate products are there? Okay, remember we just need to know the products. Anyone else? What other products you observe being extracted out along the way? Okay, notice that ATP is also one of the products along the way. Yeah? Okay, so there's another product you want to take note of. Huh? So one of the products along the way is going to be ATP. Any other products? NADH, you see the same bugger over and over again. Yeah? So every time you see NADH, understand that it is a result of an electron carrier extracting out more electrons. Okay? So I'm going to simplify it again. So again, electrons are extracted out. Okay? And this electron is used to be converted, is stored in this electron carrier. Same thing over and over again. Do you see FADH? Yeah? So NAD plus is one electron carrier. FADH is also another electron carrier. Okay? Okay, I'm going to just draw one more reaction here. So FADH2 FAD. Okay. FAD is another electron carrier. Serves the same purpose as NAD+. Okay, they are just extracting out more electrons. Any other products? I actually observe one more product form. Can you spot the product? CO2. Can you see CO2 being extracted out? Yeah? Okay. So CO2 is another product other than ATP. So where does the CO2 come from when you breathe out? It actually comes from both link reaction as well as the Krebs cycle. This is where it's extracted out from. Once again, I do not need you to know the intermediate steps. You just need to know who is involved, what is produced. If you really like biology, then you take it out in SH, then you will learn more in that. There's one point in my life, right? I know every single step. They tell you every single enzyme, every single intermediate step. You go and type NAD, the full name is extremely long. Okay, any questions so far? I think this is where we'll stop today. I'm going to summarize very broadly the whole point of this. Okay, the why. Why are we doing this? What's the whole point of the first 3 steps? Okay, to summarize this part, I'd like everyone now to look at the board. What is common with every step? Okay, what do you notice at every single step? What's the one common thing that happens at every single step? Sorry? Electrons, what about it? We are extracting electrons out, right? Right? That's essentially what's happening at every step. Notice over here, we are extracting electrons. Oh no. Come back here. At every single step, we're doing the same thing. We are extracting electrons out. We are extracting electrons out. We are extracting electrons out. We're extracting electrons out as much as possible from glucose. So distracting. Okay? Remember earlier, the broad overview of cellular respiration is this. Essentially, this is all we're doing. This is glucose. And then there's oxygen. Then at the end of the day, we get CO2 and we get water. All we are really doing is to extract out as much electrons as possible. And it's stored temporarily with eventually we'll pass it to oxygen. Okay? So essentially, steps 1, 2, and 3, the main point is just get as much electrons out as possible. For what purpose? For step number 4. Step number 4, you scroll down to the final page, it's called Oxidative Phosphorylation. This is where the exciting part begins. Okay. This last part actually is quite visual, but it's quite fun to watch. Okay, so your homework for today. I'd like you to read 3.34. 3.3.4. Okay? I'd like you to read up on this page to stand by for tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to play a little bit, okay? Okay, so this is my last lesson with you. Okay, then I really need you to remember what's happening today. Okay, okay, so number 1, I'd like you to read up on 3.3.4. Okay? And just watch the one video. Okay, you go to SLS and you go to part B, oxidative phosphorylation. I'll just like you to watch this video over here. Okay, plus watch SLS video. Okay, take note, text biorep. Test biorep. Who was the biorep last year?
You don't have.
Oh yeah.
What? You don't have one?
Oh, don't have.
Why she didn't answer something like
Oh, okay. Okay, so please read up 3.34 as well as watch SLS. Our class has missed one lesson yesterday, so we are a little bit behind. But the way I plan it, I believe we can finish. Yeah, but I need you to do your part. Just watch the video and read up. Okay, then next lesson when we come in, we're going to role play. We're going to figure out how this last part happens. Okay, everyone will have a role, and we're going to be moving about, just to understand how it works. Okay? I believe also by this Saturday, you have to complete the RT, right? Yeah? Oh, okay, over here. Which notes?
the news for second.
I mean, the first chapter, are you all done? Yeah. Done, okay. So anyway, we have 3 more weeks to the end of term, right? Yeah, so just by the end of the March holidays, you complete your remaining 2 set of notes. Okay? Because, I haven't said, right? Okay, so we're going to do something different this year. Actually, I've been secretly doing it in my classes, but, okay, but now we make it across the board. Your notes, you can use it for your quiz. Okay? So, when you come back from the March holidays, there will be 1 quiz. This quiz will encompass everything we learned in term 1. But you know what I realized? There's that you have never really put your notes to the test. Right? So, why not we kill 2 birds with 1 stone? You make your notes, and during the quiz itself, the last 10 minutes, you will get to use your notes. Okay? Yeah, last 10 minutes. Okay, then you're wondering why last 10 minutes? Because at the first part of the quiz, right, still want you to train your memory. Okay? Train yourself to work without the notes. Because at the end of the day, the truth is that biology, there's a memory as well as a skill. I want you to apply your skills first in the front part. Everything that you cannot remember, like how to spell pyruvate, right? Save it for the last part. Okay? That 10 minutes is where you want to be able to access your notes, search for information fast. Okay? No, like use your notes. Okay? Yeah, so, but what's the point of this? So that you can test your notes. You know what happened when I let students do this the previous years? Despite bringing the notes, they're still unable to do the quiz. So what does this mean? It means that if you had studied these notes for your actual exam, it's not going to be any use at all. Right? Okay, so that's the point. Do your notes well so that you can put it to the test during the quiz. So that when we are going through the quiz, you touch up your notes. Make your notes immediately useful. Okay? That's the whole point. Yes?
Should we use the notes that is
No. Use the notes you make. Okay? I don't want you to make use of the textbook. this way. Right before your exams, you won't have the time to compress and read through hundreds of pages of textbook. However, you would have by then 4 or 5 sheets of paper, each one a summary of your chapter. That is the point of making notes. Okay? So if you follow along with me as I say, if you are diligent, okay, you're going to be prepared. All you have to do at the end of the day is just do practice papers. Okay? Yeah? So after March holidays, you'll put your notes to the test. Okay, that's all I have for today. Thank you. You can go for a short break before the next lesson begins. I mean, if you, as long as it's your own notes, I mean, different people make notes differently. Yeah, I may need the help of someone else.